He went ballistic. Not uncommon because, I mean, you cheating on me. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Janae, if you didn't know, and today's video is another true crime episode. So if you're ready, let's go. Alright y'all, so nail check. These nails have been on my hand for a good week and a half, maybe 2 weeks now. And I would have thought that they would have been done came off. However, they still holding on, so am I. But yeah, other than that, y'all, let's go ahead and jump right into today's case. And today we are going to be talking about a young lady named Tyshika Askins, who was born on August 23rd, 1981 in Cambridge, Maryland, to her mom, Diane. And I couldn't find her dad's name nowhere, but at some point in Tyshika's life, I don't know if it was before she was born or after, Diane and her dad was split up, and Diane would end up raising Tyshika as a single mother. However, her dad was still present in her life. Now, as far as Tashika's upbringing, there's not a lot known about her life growing up. But what is known is that she went to Cambridge Dorchester South High School, and it's here in her freshman year where she met a boy named Alonzo Dennis Jr. And the two of them started a little high school romance. And Tashika was a relatively good child who did pretty well in school. So as long as Alonzo wasn't distracting her from her schoolwork, Diane didn't have a problem with Tashika and Alonzo dating. And as Tashika and Alonzo's relationship went on, Diane started to feel like Alonzo was a good person for her daughter. He was very respectful, he treated Tashika well, and he knew that her academics came first. And Tashika and Alonzo would continue their relationship throughout high school and even after. And after Tashika graduated in 1999, she would get a job at a nursing home as a CNA because her goal was to eventually become a nurse. And like I said, she and Alonzo were still dating even after she graduated, and eventually the two of them would move in together. And as it goes in a lot of these cases, shortly after they moved in together, Tashika found out that she was pregnant. And at this point, it's 2001. And although they were still quite young, they were both really excited because they had both graduated high school. They had good paying jobs. They were still in a committed relationship, and everything just seemed to be falling into place for them. So while they didn't feel like they was quite ready, they felt like they was in a good situation to have the baby nonetheless. And on March 31st, 2002, Tashika gave birth to her and Alonzo's son. And right away, the both of them took very well to becoming parents. They absolutely loved being parents to their son. And for the next 2 years, everything seemed to be going well. But by 2004, cracks had begun to show in Tashika and Alonzo's relationship because there had been rumors circulating that Alonzo had another baby on the way. Now, I don't know how true this was or not, but that was what was in the rumor mill, and Tashika was not here for it. She had dealt with a little bit of infidelity in the past from Alonzo, but having another baby on her, that just wasn't the move. And so after 9 years, the relationship ended. However, the two of them had decided that no matter what was going on between them, they needed to put on a united front for their son. Because as we all know, a breakup can be real messy, especially with the kid involved. But the both of them genuinely wanted what was best for their son, so they ended up working out a custody agreement and didn't have to involve the courts at all. The agreement was pretty much that Tashika would have primary custody of their son and Alonzo would get him every other weekend. So by all accounts, it seemed to be a very amicable, cordial breakup type of situation. And eventually the both of them moved on and started seeing other people. However, they always kept an open line of communication with each other no matter who they was with. But on the night of June 6, 2004, going into the morning of June 7th, something went wrong. So it was Alonzo's weekend to have the baby, and it had already been prearranged that Tashika was going to pick the baby up from Alonzo's, I don't know if it was from his house or from his mama's house, or maybe he was living with his mama. I don't know. But the agreement was that Tashika was going to pick the baby up. The time that she was supposed to pick him up comes and goes, and there's still no Tashika. But Alonzo had already made plans for that evening, assuming that Tashika would have picked up their son by then. And so he ended up asking his mom to watch the baby while he went on and carried out his plans that he had previously made. So that night, he spent the night at his girlfriend's house as planned. And when he woke up and went home, he found that the baby was still at the house with his mama. And he thought that was really weird because it wasn't like Tashika to not communicate with him if she wasn't going to be able to pick up the baby. And so he kind of started to get worried, and he told his mom that he was going to drop the baby off to Tashika and check on her. So he makes it over to Tashika's house, and when he get there, it was kind of unclear to me if the door was slightly open or if he knocked and didn't get an answer. I'm not really sure how that went, but nonetheless, he was able to make his way inside of the apartment where he found Tashika on the bedroom floor, and it was apparent to him that she was no longer living. And so he rushed out of the house because he didn't want his baby to see that, and he called 911. And on this call, he is hysterical. He forgetting details. He can't remember where she lived, like the address. He pretty much all over the place, but he is able to relay enough information to get the officers where they need to be. So the officers show up, and they do find Tashika in the bedroom, and her face is covered with a pillow, and there is blood everywhere. And it was apparent to them that she had been attacked. And as they're looking around, they notice that there was no forced entry into the home, and they also note that this did not appear to be a robbery. And the way in which Tashika was found bludgeoned, everything pointed to this being a very personal attack. Now, as they processed the scene, they made a note that Tashika was a very tidy individual. Everything was in its place. I mean, outside of the bedroom where the attack occurred, everything else in the apartment was clean and pristine, except for this orange juice container that was left on the counter. And not only was the orange juice container just left out of the refrigerator on the counter, the top was off and it was on the floor. And it was just something about that orange juice container and the top not being on it just didn't fit with the whole aesthetic of Tashika's apartment. And so they ended up collecting this orange juice container and the top along with other pieces of evidence. So once they started bringing people down for questioning, Tashika's family was quickly ruled out of the equation as being the people who committed this crime. And as y'all know, the main suspect in any case like this is either the boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, or the family. And since the family was already ruled out and Alonzo was the person who actually found her, they wanted to get his side of the story. They wanted to see where he was at and what he was doing at the time of the murder. And so when they questioned him, he pretty much tells them the story that I just told y'all. And he was very cooperative with the police. He gave them his fingerprints, he gave them DNA, and he also consented to take a polygraph test. And this polygraph test was to be conducted a couple of days later. And with that, Alonzo was free to go because they really didn't have nothing to hold him on. And so the investigation continued. So they're going around and they asking her friends and family, is there anybody that they can think of who would want to hurt Tashika? And everybody said no. And with nobody else at the forefront of this investigation, Alonzo became their prime suspect. They just needed to find the evidence to be able to charge him. So what they did was they took some fingerprints off of the orange juice container that was at Tashika's house. And the fingerprints did not match to Tashika. And so they tested Alonzo's fingerprints against the ones that was on the orange juice container, but they didn't match. So by now, the autopsy on Tashika had been completed, and they determined that her cause of death was strangulation and blunt force trauma. They also was able to collect some DNA from under her fingernails because Tashika did not go down without a fight. She fought her attacker until she couldn't fight anymore. And so they were pretty hopeful that the DNA from under her fingernails would lead to her killer. And also during this autopsy, they found no evidence of sexual assault. And they also determined that her time of death was more than likely on the morning of June 7th between 1 and 4 a.m. Now, with Alonzo being their prime suspect, they go ahead and test his DNA against the DNA that was found under her fingernails. However, this is not a quick process. This ain't gonna come back same day, but they're convinced that it's gonna be a match to Alonzo. So while they wait for the results of that to come back, they dig deeper into Alonzo. They want to make sure they gather as much evidence as possible so that they can secure their conviction. So they go and talk to Alonzo's girlfriend, the one whose house he said he was over. And she said that he was in fact at her house that night. And she said that the two of them had watched a movie. And she said that she had gone to bed at around 12 a.m. And she woke up at roughly around 4:30 to go use the bathroom or something. And Alonzo was in the bed with her. But the police are like, okay, so if you went to sleep at 12, woke up at 4:30, and the murder happened between 1 and 4, Alonzo had time to get up out that bed, go do what he did, and come back to sleep. So at this point, they getting even more convinced that this is Alonzo. But again, they want to gather as much evidence as possible. So they go and talk to Tashika's neighbors. They said that that night, they seen Tashika outside arguing with a man who was in a tan or beige car. They did say, though, that there was no physical altercation. Nobody put hands on nobody, but there was an argument. And that was enough for the detectives to want to know more. But before they could figure out who was in this tan or beige car, Alonzo's sister calls them up. And it's June 11th at this point. And I don't know if I said it or not, but the baby was in Alonzo's custody while they were doing their investigation. So the sister calls up and she like, okay, so I just found something in this baby bag and y'all need to take a look at it. And what she found was a letter. What this letter said was, "You gon' die," signed Q. And the detectives was like, okay, so all of a sudden you find this random ass threatening letter talking about some "you gonna die" signed by a man named Q. They felt like it was just bogus, right? But of course they did have to follow this lead, and just like they thought, there was nobody with the initial Q, name Q, middle name Q, last name started with Q, none of that. They couldn't find a Q in Tashika's circle at all. So they felt like Alonzo's family was just making stuff up to try to help him get away with this crime. Because not only did they not find this person named Q, but they also didn't get any fingerprints from this letter. And so this made them look even harder at Alonzo instead of what they felt like the family wanted them to do, which was look away from him. So they ended up getting a warrant to search his house. And when they did, they actually found some clothes, like some pants and some socks of Alonzo's that had apparent bloodstains on them. And if that wasn't enough, when Alonzo came in for more questioning, they noticed that he was all scratched up. He had scratches on his knuckles, his rib cage, and like a long scratch on like the back of his bicep is what they said. And when the detectives asked him about it, he really couldn't give them a good answer as to why he was scratched up like this. And then on top of that, they found out that on the night of the murder, Alonzo had actually switched cars with his cousin. And the car that he switched to was a tan or beige car. So with all of this circumstantial evidence piling up against him, Alonzo Dennis was arrested and charged with murder on November 1st, 2004. And Tashika's family was beyond hurt by this because they never once in a million years thought that Alonzo would be able to do this to Tashika. It just didn't compute in their minds that Alonzo was capable of something like this. So now that Alonzo was in jail, Tashika's mom, Diane, ended up getting temporary custody of their baby. And even through her grief and all of her pain and suffering that she was going through, Diane still made it a point to take her grandson to go see his dad at every chance she got. And I believe she said she went once a week. And God bless that woman's heart, because I don't know if I would have been able to sit in the face of my daughter's accused killer and allow him to see his son. Like, I don't know. Miss Diane is she's a saint. So now while the prosecution is getting all their ducks in a row and aligning all of this evidence, getting ready to go to trial, the DNA results come back from under Tashika's fingernails. And surprisingly, it wasn't a match to Alonzo. So after spending 2 months in jail, Alonzo was released and all of the charges against him were dropped. And once he regained custody of his son, he took him and moved out of state. And y'all, that is just so crazy to me because there was so much circumstantial evidence against Alonzo that literally made it appear as though he could have genuinely been the one to commit this murder. And he wasn't. Like, they almost got it wrong. They almost convicted an innocent man of murder. And I don't doubt that he would have gotten convicted because all of the pieces was lining up. He was scratched up. He was in a tan or beige car. She was seen arguing with a man in a tan or beige car. Like, that is wild to me. And it turns out that he only switched cars with his cousin that night because he was cheating on his girlfriend and he didn't want the people around to see his car at another girl's house. But yeah, y'all, they almost got it wrong. And so now they have to figure out who actually did it. And by this point, pretty much all the leads had dried up and there was no new leads or tips coming in. And because of this, the case went cold for about a year. It wasn't until September 2005 where they would catch the break that they needed. And it all stemmed from somebody applying for a job. So this man had applied for a job at the post office. And if any of y'all have ever applied for a federal job or jobs working with kids or something like that, y'all know that fingerprinting is a part of the hiring process. And so the man applied for a job at the post office and he had to get fingerprinted. And once they ran his fingerprints, the fingerprints came back as a match to the fingerprints that was on the orange juice bottle that was left in Tashika's apartment. And these fingerprints belong to a man named Richard Blanks Sr. When they asked Tashika's family and friends about a man named Richard, everybody was stumped because didn't nobody know who Richard was. So they dug a little bit further into Richard's background and they found out that Richard was the boyfriend of one of Tashika's old co-workers named Lisa Pender. So they bring Richard in for questioning and they ask him all the questions. And he said that he did know Tashika and he knew her through Lisa, but that he had never been to her apartment and he didn't even know where she lived. So they was like, okay, cool, bet. So if you've never been inside of her apartment and you've never had any kind of interaction with her, it's fine if we take your DNA just to rule you out. And up until this point, Richard had been very cooperative with the detectives. But once they was like, can we get your DNA? He was like, he tried to shut it down. But they was already one step ahead of him because they already had a feeling that he wasn't going to let them to just willingly take the DNA. So they had already prearranged a search warrant. Is it a search warrant? I don't know. But they had already prearranged a warrant to grab that DNA from him. So he didn't have a choice. And once they collected the DNA from him, they sent him on his way while they waited for the results. But they didn't send him on his way just willy-nilly. They actually had him under 24-hour surveillance so that he couldn't, run away. So they sent Richard's DNA off for testing, and while they're waiting for the results to come back, they want to talk to Lisa because they want to know how much she knows and if she can tell them anything about that night. But once they get Lisa in for questioning, she's tight-lipped. She don't want to talk. She don't want to say nothing. But they did find somebody who was associated with Lisa who was willing to talk, and this was her side piece. This is a man that she was cheating on Richard with. And he said that once Richard found out that him and Lisa was seeing each other, he went ballistic. Not uncommon because, you cheating on me, bitch. But Richard didn't get mad and take his anger out on Lisa, which was the person cheating on him. He said that Richard started harassing him. And he said that Richard pretty much threatened him and his whole family. But apparently boyfriend number 2 didn't care too much, and neither did Lisa, because the two of them still was sneaking and creeping. And boyfriend number 2 said that the night that the murder occurred, him and Lisa was actually together. And detectives was able to get phone records showing that that night Richard was constantly calling Lisa, like back to back to back to back. But she was not answering her phone. And apparently this pissed Richard off. So finally, the DNA results come back, and to nobody's surprise, it was a match to Richard. And so the officers who they had surveilling Richard went and arrested him without any problems. But despite his fingerprints and DNA being at the crime scene, Richard maintained his innocence. He pled not guilty, and so they had to take it to trial. And at the trial, prosecution presented the theory that on the night of Tashika's murder, Richard was trying to get in contact with Lisa, and when he couldn't, it infuriated him because he knew that she was out there cheating with boyfriend number 2. And so when he couldn't get in contact with her, he decided to go to Tashika's house because he felt like she would know where Lisa was at. And once he got there, she welcomed him into her home because she had met him on prior occasions. But when he decided to ask about Lisa, Tashika either didn't know for real or just was unwilling to tell him where Lisa was at. And that's when he attacked her. Now, the defense, they pretty much still tried to put all of the blame on Alonzo, even though it had pretty much been proven that he was not involved at all. And Richard actually ended up taking the stand in his own defense. And he did this in an attempt to explain away the DNA. And he pretty much said that he and Tashika were having an affair. And he said that he lied because he didn't want Lisa to find out. But when it was all said and done, the jury didn't believe him at all, and they found him guilty and he was sentenced to life in prison. However, in 2008, he ended up appealing his sentence based off of the line of questioning from the prosecutor, basically saying that the prosecutor was asking him questions that would make him breach lawyer-client confidentiality, I think. And he won, and his conviction was overturned. And so they conducted a new trial in 2010, but he was found guilty again. And he was sentenced to life again. So yeah, sucks for him, but good riddance, my boy. Yeah, that is all I have for today's video. Thank you all so very much for watching. Let me know what you thought about it, and I will see you all in the next one. But what is known is that she went to what? But what is known is that she went to okay. But what is known is that she went to Cambridge. Okay. But what is known is that she went to Cambridge, and the two of them And Tashika and Alonzo will carry out their relationship. No. And in 1999, when Tashika graduated from high school, she would get a job as a CNA because her... What is this? I'm not paying for that. What is this? Anyway. Okay, this train and all of that is wild. Wild right now. And as goes in most of these... And as goes in a lot of these cases... And as goes in a lot of these cases... And as it goes in a lot of these cases... Damn. And it was and immediately both of them took very well to becoming parents. The two of them, no. And immediately and right away, both of them took very well to become, no. And right away, both of them took very, no, fuck. Because there had been rumors circulating that Tashika, nope. She had dealt with a little bit of infidelity in the past from Alonzo, but having another baby was the straw, was the what? Is it the straw breaker? It was, is that the straw breaker? Is that how they say it? I don't know. But he does relay enough information to let the officers know that and not only was the orange juice container just left out of the refrigerator on the counter, the top was off and it was on the floor. And that just in the whole ambiance, no, it's cold down here. Oh my God. So they go and talk to Alonzo's girlfriend. The girlfriend, no, okay. So with all of this circumstantial evidence piling up against him, Alonzo Dennis was arrested and charged with murder on November 1st, 2014. Nope. And when they asked Tashika's family and friends about who's William, I was about to say William, but despite his fingerprints and what am I saying? And at the trial, prosecution would present a defense. No. What?